Hello and welcome to the world of diagnostics. Multitrait Multimethod analysis, or how can you be sure that your newly developed instrument really measures what it's supposed to measure? Keyword construct validity. Well, let's suppose you are working, for example, for a advertising and marketing company, and your boss wants you to develop a new creativity questionnaire because he wants to know who are the most creative minds in his company. So he tells you we need an instrument to find out who are the most suitable candidates for the most creative jobs. And as you believe it might be dangerous to have a self-assessment, I mean, many people might say, okay, I'm the most creative guy in the company, so this might be dangerous. You decide to have an external assessment, which means the colleagues had to rate the creativity of each other. And let's suppose you got it all right, you stick to the rules of test construction. I mean, many people don't know that there are really huge books on the topic of how to construct test items and how to construct tests. And let's suppose you got it all right and you developed, let's suppose, 10 items, 10 questions. Like, for example, person X is my colleague, Stephanie is a very creative thinker. And then there are 6 possibilities to answer, from I completely agree to I completely disagree. Another item might be my colleague, Norbert, really has original ideas. I completely disagree. He never has good ideas. So you completed your questionnaire and you gave it to your boss, and he says, well, that looks all right, but I'm not sure if it really measures creativity. I mean, if a person is having really great ideas, I mean, this could be also an item for a very intelligent person. So maybe we are not measuring to construct creativity, but we are measuring intelligence. And I want a questionnaire on creativity, not on intelligence. So what can you do to prove that your questionnaire is really measuring what it's supposed to measure? Has what it's called a good construct validity. Well, one method to examine the construct validity is the so-called Multitrait Multimethod analysis. The idea of the Multitrait Multimethod analysis is to simultaneously measure different traits, like, for example, creativity and fluid intelligence and maybe, for example, crystalline intelligence, and to measure those not only by one method like your questionnaire, but also by different methods, at least 2, but usually you choose to take more methods. And these methods can be tests, you can choose questionnaires, but you can also choose other methods, for example, physiological measures like cortisol to assess stress, or you can use neuropsychological measures like which parts of the brain are very active in certain situations. So there are many methods you can choose. For our example, I decided to choose just 2 methods, which were questionnaires on the one hand, in which the colleagues have to, in case of creativity, have to assess the creativity of their co-workers and In case of fluid intelligence, they had to answer questions like person X is very good and fast at abstract thinking. And in case of crystalline intelligence, which is in the first part about your general knowledge about the world, it could be an item like person X is very informed about all topics of life. For the tests, you can choose traditional tests. In case of creativity, one famous test is, well, think of unusual creative ways to use a brick. And then people have 1 minute to think of many possibilities, unusual, excellent ideas of how to use a brick. In case of fluid and crystalline intelligence, you can choose for fluid intelligence, for example, the Raven matrices, or you can choose the culture fair test matrices. There are many possibilities in case of fluid intelligence and crystalline intelligence. So you have two methods, the questionnaire and the test, to assess your constructs, creativity, fluid intelligence, and crystalline intelligence. And the reason why you do this is you want to have low correlations between the results of your creativity questionnaire and between the results of the fluid intelligence or crystalline intelligence questionnaire, because you don't want that those are measuring the same, so they have to correlate low. This is important for the so-called discriminant construct validity, which means you have to be able to differentiate your questionnaire from the results of questionnaires on intelligence. This is what you need to do to prove your boss, okay, my questionnaire is not measuring intelligence, but it's measuring creativity. But in fact, this is not enough. You also have to show that your creativity questionnaire also correlates high with other instruments that measure creativity as well. So you want a high correlation between the results of your creativity questionnaire and the results of the creativity test, which was, for example, think of unusual ways to use a brick. And if you find high correlations between the two instruments measuring creativity, this is an indicator of high convergent construct validity. So the Multitrait Multimethod analysis, which was developed by Campbell and Fiske in the year 1959, and which is a quite famous method in psychology. For example, in the year 1992, articles in which the Multitrait Multimethod analysis was used were under the top 10 of the most cited articles in psychology. So this is a very famous method to examine construct validity, But of course, there are also some flaws in this method, which we will take a look at the end of the episode. But we haven't finished yet, so let's take a look at the Multitrait Multimethod matrix. First of all, let's take a look at the long gray diagonal in the middle. In this diagonal, you see the reliability coefficients, which in our case is a retest reliability, which means the participants answered the questionnaires and took the tests for 2 times with a time interval of, let's take 5 weeks. And as you can see, there are quite solid correlations between the 2 points in time. The only weaker reliability coefficient is between the creativity test at test 1 and the test 5 weeks later, which is a little bit problematic, because if you have a test to measure a trait which is supposed to be permanent and not changing over time, you want that test to measure equally good no matter when you measure. I mean, if you have a weighting scale to measure the weight of gold, for example, it would be very problematic if at one time it's measuring 2 kilos too much and another time 3 kilos too less. So, of course, you want every instrument to be as reliable as possible. What's really great to see is the high reliability of our newly developed creativity questionnaire, which is 0.85, which in fact is the highest number of all. So in this respect, it really seems you did a really good job. Your questionnaire is really reliable. But maybe it's reliably measuring intelligence and not creativity. So you have to look at the other correlations, like, for example, the so-called monotrait-hetero method correlations, which you can see in the pink-like diagonal. And monotrait-hetero method means nothing else but that you measure one trait, like, for example, creativity, with hetero methods. And as you can see, these correlations are quite solid. They are not that high as the reliability coefficients, which is quite normal. By the way, if they were of the same height, this would mean that there's no influence of the method on measuring the construct. No matter if you measure with a questionnaire or with a test, you always get the same correlations. But as I said, usually the correlations are a little bit lower, and in this case we have moderate correlations, for example, for your creativity questionnaire with your creativity test. And you definitely want to have high correlations, because this is your indicator for the so-called convergent construct validity. This is an indicator that you are really measuring creativity with your new questionnaire. In case of fluid intelligence or crystalline intelligence, the correlations are a bit higher, which might be because of the low reliability of the creativity test. Because the lower the reliability, the lower the correlations to other measurements of the same trait. But what about the discriminant construct validity? can I really separate the results of my creativity questionnaire from what is measured by a questionnaire on fluid intelligence or crystalline intelligence? And as we can see in the bright gray fields, those triangles, there are in fact at least low correlations between my creativity questionnaire and the questionnaires on fluid and crystalline intelligence. But that there is a little correlation is well known from the theory. Creativity and intelligence, you usually find correlations of 0.2 in the literature. So these correlations are okay, and they speak for a quite good discriminant construct validity of my questionnaire. What is quite interesting in this case, I mean, of course, I put the numbers in there, so this is just an ideal typical case, but you usually find heterotrait monomethod correlations. Different traits are measured with one method. You usually find such correlations for fluid intelligence and crystalline intelligence if they are measured with a test, which is not surprising because fluid intelligence and crystalline intelligence are part of a bigger construct, which is global intelligence. So as facets of one and the same construct, they of course have to correlate with each other. Another indicator for discriminant validity are the so-called heterotrait-hetero method correlations, which you can see in the bright yellow triangles. And in these areas of the matrix, you want to have the lowest correlations because you don't want to have correlations between different traits measured by different methods. This would be quite problematic. And again, if we take a look at our creativity questionnaire, we have really low correlations, which probably don't even reach significance. So you can show this your boss and you can tell him, hey, look at the multitrait multimethod analysis. The questionnaire I developed really measures creativity. We can use this questionnaire in our company. It's a really good, reliable instrument to measure the creativity of our workers. At the end, I just want to hint on a weakness, an obvious weakness of the multitrait multimethod analysis, and this is that the decision whether the results of the multitrait multimethod analysis speak for construct validity of my instrument is quite subjective. I mean, if there are not that great and obvious results as in this case, and if there are mixed results, the decision whether I say, okay, it's high enough or it's not high enough is felt by the constructor. Of course, if the decision is felt on low evidence, the constructor will be criticized heavily by the scientific community, but there is no interference statistical solution to the question, do we have construct validity or do we not? So a probably better way is the confirmatory factor analysis, which allows us to bring in a method factor and a trait factor, and in the end we can inference statistically check our model. That's it for today. See you next time.